Hey, the last 3 weeks have been so great, and I've been so thankful that you guys have been tracking with us. You know, we've talked about being under pressure, the pressure of being alone in that first week, the pressure of the chaos all around us in that second week. And last week we talked about the pressure of searching for happiness and always coming up empty. And we've found at the end of each of these sessions that it really is leaning into Jesus and walking in step with Him that helps alleviate that pressure, that we're unable to do this by ourselves. But when we are walking with Jesus, that the pressure loosens and that we're able to live into who we were designed to be. So before we get into the session today, I actually want to stop for a discussion question that reflects back on the last 3 weeks. And here's the discussion question. What is one thing that sticks out to you about the last 3 weeks of this Under Pressure series? So pause the video, reflect on that, and we'll be back in just a moment. The pressure that we find ourselves under takes the shape of so many different things. We've talked about a bunch so far in this series, but I think it's actually the bad choices that you and I make that weigh on us the heaviest. The things that we know are wrong to do, but we do them anyway. These things weigh on us. The guilt and the regret just sit on our shoulders, and we can barely function with that weight on us. I mean, we make silly mistakes too, silly bad choices, right? Like when my dog was a puppy, he was a chewer, he would eat everything, but I still put him in the laundry room when we'd leave. One day I came home, he had torn up the entire linoleum. The whole floor was in pieces all over the place. I thought, you little idiot. I put him into a kennel the next time, big plastic kennel, it was very strong. He chewed out the corner, got out, ate the drywall. This little psycho chewed everything in our house, and if I didn't love him so much, this would not have been a relationship that would have lasted. Now, when I was a rookie dad, my daughter was just 2, walked her down to the corner store, bought her a full-size chocolate bar, because I thought, hey, kids must like chocolate, I don't know. And she's walking home, it's plus 30 out, the chocolate bar melts all over her, she is a complete mess. It's all over me, because she started crying, and I had to carry her home now. And I got home, and my wife just laughed at me, and she brings this up maybe monthly, still to this day. When Brooklyn was 3, we were out for a bike ride, and Dad thought, let's go down a hill. She thought, that's a great idea, so we get up on this hill. She's on her little balance bike, I'm like 3, 2, 1, let's go. And we go down the hill. I'm doing just fine. And I look over at her, she's doing great too. But she looked back at me and turned her handlebars. She went right over to the handlebars and landed on her face, just down the hill, scraping her face. So I carried her home like any good dad would, just blood pouring out of her mouth. And I thought, you know what, this one's on Dad. I actually maybe shouldn't have done this. The other day, I went to Freshie, I bought a quinoa bowl for lunch. I mean, this isn't necessarily a bad choice, but I was driving. You can't eat a quinoa bowl while you're driving. I got quinoa everywhere. That doesn't come out of the carpet very well, out of the minivan. It's a terrible choice. We make these bad choices all the time. I mean, it's always been this way though. Like, you might have heard some of these stories before, but like when I was in high school, we used to just sit on the corner of the street, wait for a car to come by, throw a snowball at it, hit the car, hoping that they'd chase us. It was terrifying. It wasn't even fun at that point. We were probably causing damage. We weren't thinking. One day, me and my buddy thought that it would be funny to pull the fire alarm. That day, we learned it was a federal offense and that you could be charged up to $5,000. Just little idiots. I mean, one time we thought, let's ride our dirt bike through the city, in the back alleys and stuff. No helmet, no license, no common sense. The cop that brought me home that day was very nice. He was a very nice guy. He did need to send me to small claims court where the judge asked me, what were you thinking? And I said, I wasn't thinking, I don't know, just a little idiot. Your next discussion question or journal question, when was the last time you were a little idiot? When was the last time you made a silly mistake, a bad choice that turned out poorly for you and you should have known better? Go for it. We are so often our own worst enemies. And I don't know about you, but for me, it's not just these little silly mistakes, these bad choices that I make. There are some major bad choices that happen, some major mistakes that I live through, that I have to deal with because of the way that I'm trying to control my life. You know, when I was 18, I borrowed my buddy Todd's car. He's my best friend. And for whatever reason, I took this car way too fast. You know, in the highways in Saskatchewan, they're just very flat and they're very straight, and the car gets up there pretty quick, and I took it way too fast. And I got back that day and I was joking with him, kind of saying like, oh, I took your car like pretty fast. And he said, well, I sure hope not, because it's been having some fluid issues. And I was like, I don't know much about cars, but it's fine. And I went away and I came back a week later and he let me know that it wasn't running well. He took it into the garage and that actually the engine was toast. That actually had ruined the engine for his car and it was gonna cost thousands of dollars, and my heart just sank in that moment. Here was my best friend, and I did something so stupid to ruin something that he had purchased, that he had owned, that he was depending on. And I had probably at this point ruined our friendship and ruined the relationship that we could have in the future because of my stupidity. And you know, in my mind, I'm just thinking like, this is the type of thing that breaks up friendships, that creates enemies, that people don't get over. And I'm racking my brain to think how I could pay the thousands of dollars for this. I was about to go off to college. I had no money, I wasn't working, and I had no way to pay for this. And when I saw Todd, I just said, man, I am so sorry. Like, I'm gonna pay for this, I will figure it out. And he just looked at me and said, AJ, I know you can't pay for it. You're going to college, that's more important. I'll figure it out. I'll take care of it. We're good. And that was all. That's all he's ever said to me. I bring it up all the time because I still feel guilty, but that's all he ever said about it. And he did take care of it. And he did pay for that, the thing I could not pay for. And you know, it is the only reason that he to this day is still my best friend. It is the only reason that our kids are growing up together. It's the only reason that our wives are so close, that we go on vacations together, that we go to every birthday party of each family all the time. It's the only reason that we get to live life together still, because he forgave me at a time where I did not deserve it and I could not pay the cost of my mistake. And this is a little bit like the way Jesus treats you and I. When we come to him with the mistakes that we've made, when we know that there is sin in our lives, and we come to him knowing that we can't do anything about it, he responds like this. See, Jesus explains this in a story that you probably know called the prodigal son. The story should probably be called the forgiving father, because it's actually about this incredible forgiveness that the father gives to this idiot little son who wants to be selfish and does his own thing. The context of this passage is that Jesus is being pushed by the religious people as to why he is hanging out with so many messed up people, so many sinners in the eyes of the religious. Earlier in the Gospels, Jesus has already said, it's not the healthy that need a doctor, but the sick. I have come to help the sick. He has come for messed up people. He has come for sinners like you and like I. People who make bad choices, who have to live with that guilt, who are suffering under the pressure of the regret of their decisions. And so he tells this story to help explain how the Father sees his children when they mess up, when they make these mistakes. This is in Luke 15, verse 11. It starts by saying this. To illustrate the point further, Jesus told them this story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of your estate now before you die. So the father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. Now this is like you going to your dad and saying, hey, I know like that you own this house, but I also know that like when you die, I will own the house. So I don't want to wait till like I'm 50 to get that money. I want you to sell the house now when I'm 15, and so I can have the money now. And the father's saying, okay. Now, kind of crazy that the Father does that, but it's an important point because God lets us make our decisions. You see, in this story, it's an analogy, it's a parable that Jesus is saying. And in this story, you and I are this son that is being selfish, and God the Father is this forgiving Father. And He allows us to make our mistakes, to make our bad choices, because we have to want the relationship with Him. He didn't create us to be these little robots that did exactly what He tells us to do. He created us with the decision-making capability to live our own life and to choose to love Him, to choose to walk in step with Him. So the Father lets His Son be selfish and do this. Verse 13 says, a few days later, this younger son packed all his belongings and moved to a distant land, and there he wasted all his money in wild living. This kid made some bad choices. Not only did he offend his family and leave them, he moved off somewhere and spent it all in wild living, making these bad choices over and over again. You see, the analogy Jesus is making is that when we make these bad choices, we put distance between Him and us. That we've been talking about walking in step with Jesus and how we must rely on Him to get out from the pressure that we constantly feel. And when we continually engage in things that we know are bad for us, that we know are against what God has asked us to do, we keep adding sin into our lives. It's not just these overt sins where we are like, you know what, God, I'm going to do this anyway. I'm so mad at you, I'm going to leave, like the story. Often it goes more like this. It's like, my wife and I, we watch TV at the end of the day. 9 o'clock rolls around and we turn something on Netflix. And we sit down, and Cheryl lives a lot healthier than I do, and I'm trying to learn. But at 9 o'clock, I still like a bag of chips. So I go to the pantry and I grab a bag of chips, and I bring those over. And Cheryl's typically like, I do not want any of those chips. And I typically respond by saying, I did not get any of these chips for you. I will eat these chips. And she says, I don't want any. Do not give me any chips. And I'm like, I will protect these chips with my life. You won't get any of them. And she's like, good. And we watch the show. It's a little less intense than this usually, but we watch the show. And so we're sitting watching the show, and eventually all of a sudden she reaches over for one, and I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. I am on strict orders to not let you have any chips. And she's like, I just want one. I'm just gonna have one. And I'm like, I'm gonna get in trouble for this later for sure. And she's like, I just want one. Give me one chip. And I'm like, fine, do your thing. So she grabs one chip. She's like, I'm just having one. I'm like, okay, cool. So we keep watching. A little bit later, she grabs another one, and I'm like, here we go. And a little bit later, she grabs 3. And I'm eating away, she grabs a handful. All of a sudden, it's like a fun game, and she's like, chip, please. And I'm like, oh, okay, here you go. And eventually, she reaches into the bag, and we're done the bag. We've eaten the whole thing. And she is like, what have we done? Why did you let me do this? You see, sin doesn't just show up in a major decision. It slowly creeps into our life. It slowly puts distance between us and God. And you know what? As we keep backing away from God, because of all the sin that we've put between Him and us, we end up in situations where we desperately need Him. The pressure is too much, and we start calling out to Him like, God, where are you? And He's like, I haven't moved. But you have put so many things between me and you that you have not brought back to me, that you have not asked for forgiveness for. You are living with so much sin in your life, these habits that have developed, that are tearing you apart, that are just corroding your soul, that I can't get anywhere close to walking in step with you. That His yoke is so far from us when we live with this much sin in our life. And it's just so fascinating to me why I keep doing this, why this is still such a back and forth fight for me. And this is why I think it's so important that we are in Scripture daily, and that we are in prayer daily, and that we lean into our Christian friends, that we talk about the things that we're struggling with, because we are not designed to do this by ourselves. As this kid was in his faraway land, spending all his money, making all these bad choices, he's desperate by himself. Verse 14 says, about the time the money ran out, a great famine swept over the land and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into the field to feed the pigs. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him. But no one gave him anything. So this is a dude who back home, his dad owns the whole farm and runs a whole staff. And he now is in some strange land by himself, living with the regret and the guilt of all his decisions, wishing he could eat what the pigs are eating. And it's not so different than you and I when we know we have been living in these habits of sin that we are convinced God will not forgive us for. That are convinced we have done too much for him to ever forgive us. And that's where we find this guy in this verse. So he's yearning for the pig's food. In verse 17 he says, when he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, at home, even the hired servants have enough food to spare. And here, I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, Father, I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant. And many of us don't even get to that point. Lots of us know our bad choices, know the things that we've done. We know how many times we've slept with our significant other. We know how much we have lied to everyone around us. We know about our porn addiction, but no one else does. We know about the gossip and the things we've done to tear down other people. We know about the things that we've done to hurt the people around us. We know and no one else does, and we are convinced that we are worse than everybody else. But Jesus is telling this story because he came for people like you. He came for people like me. He came for messed up little idiots that can't put one step in front of the other without screwing up, because he designed us to live in relationship with him. And he is telling us that no matter what we've done, no matter what you've done, that when we come back home to him, that he is gonna accept us, that he's gonna be compassionate, that he is gonna forgive, no matter what you've done. Listen to the rest of this story. So this kid's like, you know what, I'm gonna go home and maybe he'll hire me as a servant and I can feed his pigs. At least I'll be home. I don't get to be a son. I screwed that up, but maybe I could be one of his servants. Verse 20 says, so he returned home to his father. And while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, Father, I have sinned against both you and heaven. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But his father said to his servants, quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we've been fattening. We have to celebrate with a feast, for this son of mine was dead and is now returned to life. He was lost, but he is now found. So let the party begin. This is what happens when you and I turn from our sin, turn from our bad habits, turn from our bad choices, and come back home to Jesus. As we turn and come back, we know that we don't deserve a thing. I knew that I didn't deserve to be Todd's friend anymore, but he still forgave me. He paid the cost for what I had done, and he is the reason we are still friends. And Jesus is the reason that you have the chance to live with him, because his love and his compassion goes way deeper than we can understand. This story is him saying, this is what happens when you screw up so badly that you don't think you're allowed to come home. God turns and runs and meets you halfway down the driveway and throws a party when you come back, because you were lost and you are now found. You know, as Jesus talks us through this passage, he is explaining the character of your heavenly Father. He's explaining that God's character is steeped in love for you, in compassion for you, and in forgiveness that is available to you. He's explaining that the action that you and I need to make is to turn and to come back home, that we are designed to be with our Father, like the first few weeks, this forgiveness leads to rest. And this forgiveness leads to peace. And this forgiveness leads to a true happiness, a joy that's fulfilled, because it comes into our lives and fills this hole that we've been trying to fill with everything else, but that hole is designed to be filled with Jesus. And we get to experience that walking in step life, that in rhythm with Jesus life, that gives us life for everything around us, for all the pressure that comes at us. This is something that's not reserved for only the best people. Not reserved for the most religious people, not reserved for the people who grew up with this, not reserved for the people who never make a mistake. This is something Jesus is giving to those of us who are the most messed up. The whole point of the story, like I said at the beginning, was that people were concerned that Jesus was hanging out with messed up people like you and I. And he tells this whole story to explain that you and I are welcome. But what we need to do is to come back home and to tell him the things that we have done. And when we tell him about the things that we've done, the bad choices we've made and the sin that's been in our life, all of a sudden the forgiveness brings us back. He wipes that slate clean and we get to live life with him once again in rhythm, maybe for the first time. But as we've been saying, this isn't designed for you to live on your own. And you need to find someone to talk to about your sin, about these choices, because you're not designed to carry that weight by yourself. And while Jesus steps in and you've got the connection with him as he forgives you, you need the support of people around you. So your last discussion question, your last journal entry for this series is simply this: who are you going to talk to about the bad habits in your life? You need someone to walk with you, to help you kick these bad habits. Every choice is part of a rhythm and a habit that sticks with you and is so hard to kick on your own. So who is it? It might be your small group leader. Maybe you've got a mentor. Maybe it's your older sibling or your parent. Maybe it's someone that you're really close to at school, a Christian friend. Or maybe it's the youth pastor that's setting up these meetings for you. But you need to find someone who you can talk to. Ask for their time. They would love to give it to you. And when you pull the sin in your life out of the closet, out of the darkness, into the light where other people know about it, it loses its power over you. And the forgiveness starts to shine through, and you get to walk out from under the pressure of your bad choices and into this in step, in rhythm life with Jesus that you were designed to live. We've got a worship song coming up at the end of this that I would love if you listened through and read the lyrics and journaled about it. But after that, go and take a listen to this new song from P.D. Martin and Lauren Daigle called Come Back Home. It's about this story, and it's so victorious in its beat and its melody, and it is catchy and it's so much fun, and it is core to your understanding of this passage and the meaning of it, that when we come back home, the burden is released and we're able to walk in freedom that Jesus Christ offers us. Hey, I'm so thankful for these last 4 weeks that we've been able to spend this time together. So let's take this last discussion question, let's finish well, and let's walk out from under the pressure that we've been living with so that we can walk in step and in rhythm with Jesus Christ.